Yeah, I don't know.
I'm gonna have to sort like that.
It's just something about
Okay, so the movie's gonna come on, and then we'll listen to Mr. Thomas Nozkowski talk about his man. Joseph Brock, Casimir Nozkowski, Jodie Manasevit. Who's Brock?
Here's a couple of paintings I'm talking about. Well, check this out. Here, look at this. Here's one. Look down on it, get the shape. Hey, the hits just keep on coming. Look at this.
What makes you kind of say that it's like a painting of yours? I mean, what quality of it is?
A quality of logic on the brink of dissolution, you know, or of formlessness on the brink of becoming something. In the case of this, I mean, I don't know that I would like this so much, except that that's next to it, right? Whoa, not bad. Yeah. I also think there's something, let's look at this one again back here. I mean, there's something finely scaleless about that also intrigues me, Look over there at the, I guess they're old incubators or something, with the shadows and the holes. Look at the big, 9-inch wide or 10-inch wide holes on the top, and then the little round holes cut into the vertical walls. I mean, that kind of jump excites me as well. And then, I mean, it's interesting. The more you think about stuff, the harder you look at it, the better it gets. So look over here, this whole landscape. So here's this junkyard. These kind of man-made things dropped into this abandoned, this probably was a quarry area. Some farmer 50 years ago, 20 years ago, filled it up with some of this crap. But then look what's growing around the edge, which is this invasive rose that's been coming up. It's not a native plant, and it fills rough and torn ground. So I mean, you have two kinds of invasions here. A kind of nature invading itself, and man dropping these strange shapes into this landscape. More cross references, in these old quarries. One of the things that excites us, me anyway, let's look over here, turn over there, are the old cuts and cracks from quarrying off the stone, right? A geometry kind of brought into the landscape. And again, this particular kind of hard junk brings a similar kind of geometry into this world. Here's something for a close-up. Check this out. Here we have, and here's a Tom painting. Don't be in the shadow.
Yeah, I know.
Good. Here's a Tom painting. Look at how many different ways circles are dealt with here in this fabulous painting. I'm going to paint this tomorrow. I guarantee you.
That's awesome.
The glass transparent circle, the little wire or the edge of probably the bottom of a can. I would imagine the edge of a can. With the center rotted out. The green glass mimicking the circles, the green circles of the moss, and then to really hammer the point home to you, we'd have this white plastic rim, around this little isolated piece of moss, or maybe it's just moss. And trust me, this was not a setup. This is in fact as it really is.
These pieces of moss, are they connected to, is that glass underneath it or anything?
They hold on to a little piece of something and grow as far as they can grow, So originally probably just on a little piece of dirt that was there.
Okay. But that's wild. That is so wild.
Well, this whole thing.
But I mean, that's crazy even. That it's sitting right next to it, like, I don't know, that's
Well, I mean,
fucking...
the point I believe is that the world is full of stuff like that, you know? And what is your sensibility? What are you looking at? You know, some other artist who's into color more than I am might look at this fabulous little gray bug that just jumped into the picture. You see this guy? See this guy? He's going to jump. Oh, there he goes. Same color as the stone, you know? By the way, look at the kind of ghost circles of lichens that are dissolving back into the stone, or this kind of ghost knob of quartz coming out of it. You know, the more you look at this thing, the more stuff you can spin out in all kinds of different ways. Yeah, pretty fabulous, pretty fabulous. And you know, so circles, little circles. You know, this is the circle library, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have, you know, on a more public, larger scale, you know, these guys. Careful where you step, there's a lot of sharp glass around. Mm-hmm. You know, more circles, warped, twisted, and bent, broken, fabulous things. And unless I'm wrong, I'm going to go check. I think there's a millstone over here. And if there is, that will really put the icing on the cake. Yeah. If not a millstone, something they set up to peck away at to make a shape out of. Ooh. Speaking of fabulous things that you can make a painting about, look at the tent caterpillar nests in this poor little cherry tree.
Does that mean the cherry tree is fucked?
No, not really. These are of the noxious vermin that occasionally attack trees. I don't think these things ever kill a tree.
Wow, look at those tents. It's crazy.
When I was a kid, we used to go with a can of turpentine, and not turpentine, kerosene, and dip we have a stick with a rag on the end, dip it in, light it, and then go out and burn these things out. Let's see the guys crawling around inside, eating.
Yeah.
Alien 4.
The caterpillars.
But they're pretty fabulous in the light, you know? And what I admire as an artist is the tension structure aspect of it, you know, where you get these arcs between sticks, you know, which is the minimal surface, right? Mm-hmm. That will hold that form. Yeah. Someday we'll all live like this.
It does seem comfortable.
Don't step on glass, you're going to cut your shoe.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming to, like, Cotyledons Buckled with Loam, which we'll talk about. But before we get to that, we want to talk to Casimir about this fabulous video. You want to talk about it before I talk about it? I think that probably...
Sure.
Yeah.
I thought of my dad as a generous person too, and I think a great storyteller. And I think I was often impressed, especially at like openings and all these places, and seeing him give talks. He was someone who I think really wanted to share information and exchange information. He was really interested in kind of, you know, like telling the story of being an artist. I think he wanted it to all be kind of open, and he really was interested in sharing. And so I think, like with this film and with other times that I tried to document him, I was really trying to capture that. I really wanted to be like, hey, just speak, just, you know, go ahead and share anything that you want to about being an artist. I mean, you know, that I think was the mission. And I think the conflict was, I think he was also very interested in having like authentic experience. So you're at an opening, you're telling a story, that's very authentic, that's very, you know, you're just in the moment. But then you're going on a hike and your son takes out a camera and he's pointing it at you and he's asking, so, I just was wondering. And all of a sudden I think he would get tense that the experience was no longer authentic. I mean, I think that's kind of the normal with any kind of documentary subject. It's very hard you are always kind of trying to strike that balance. So I guess all this to say, you know, I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, it's so shaky, it's so, you know, the quality is so crummy. But really, I was just trying to be as out of the way as possible and just let him speak. And I think, you know, I think he wanted to tell those stories and kind of like figure out his process, and he liked kind of talking about process. And I think I just wanted to try to capture that. And I think the only other thing I'd add, and I think I said this to you earlier, is there's, you know, a bit of a selfish aim, which is, and it might have been unconscious back then, where I was like, oh, I want to capture this so when it's not available to me readily, that I can go and watch this and I can access that way of thinking, the way of thinking about the world. I mean, that idea of formlessness, like transforming into something that he's really he's interested in things like that and trying to capture those in-between states. I find that like very inspiring. And so the fact that he was able to talk about that and that we're in a place that kind of inspires that, and gives examples of it. It was just, to be honest, it was like, the film kind of just made itself. It was just stand here and capture all of it.
There's only a couple cuts.
Totally. I think I was thinking about that just now, because I was like, oh, dude, just cut. Like, it's shaking, trying to turn the camera around. But I think I also didn't want to miss anything in case he, you know, had a nugget, something, you know, really interesting and insightful to say.
So yeah, as a filmmaker myself, we've talked a lot about movie making, and I feel like having this film central in the exhibition, as opposed to, say, just at the entrance, which was the first idea, as a kind of educational material, so you can learn a little bit about Thomas Nozkowski, and then go in and look at the paintings. When I was starting to install in here, I thought, and I didn't know Casimir, and I didn't know Thomas Nozkowski as a person, so I wasn't sure if that was going to be okay, you know, because a lot of painters don't like to have a video in the room with their paintings, for one, or even just a video of them in the room with their painting, because it does, I feel like, change one's orientation to the paintings slightly, and I think in a way that's, in my mind, good, or at least interesting, in that it turns the paintings in some way into a relic of the life lived. So we have the legend Tom Nozkowski right next to the output of what Tom Nozkowski lived, which is the painting and what remains ultimately of the person. So film can do that in interesting ways in relation to art objects, and that's something I've always been interested in. And when I spoke to Casimir before we knew each other, I wanted to make sure that was going to be okay to bring the film next to it. But your dad, we find out, is a big film buff, and loves, and even has a list of art in films, right? So this idea of film and framing art in some way is something that interests him.
Yeah, I think my dad was a big lover of film. I think he was a lover of, honestly, all, you know, any kind of culture. I think he loved inputting it. There's, you know, film, music, books. I think he was just a voracious consumer of these things. And I think a lot of those materials wind up in the paintings. I think there is a lot of like film motif and film ideas and things that aren't motifs, but are just actually just scenes or lines or things like that, and what that made him think, which then how could he translate that to the paintings. I was telling David, he was very interested in art and film, and he had this is just like a curiosity, like he had this list going of how art and film intersected, basically like how films used art, how film used real artists, how film centered artists. So it's like this 15-page list where he's talking about, you know, trying to think, like as simple as, you know, the movie Basquiat and whose paintings were used and whose actual paintings were and who played who, but then also talking about, you know, older films where, like, I was talking about this movie Designed for Living, this Ernst Lubitsch movie where Gary Cooper kind of inexplicably plays an artist. And so he was sort of fascinated by that, and he also loved kind of cataloging ideas like that. And so I guess all this to say, a video in the gallery with art, I think he wouldn't have minded. I think he would have probably been intrigued by it. But I think if he had any reservation, it would be, he was also very protective of not wanting to kind of lead the experience of seeing his paintings, and that you could bring absolutely no knowledge of him or anything. You could bring just whatever you wanted to it, and I mean, maybe that's what every artist wants. But so I think I could see him being like uncomfortable, but I think that's fine, with the fact that here he is talking about like what he's looking for, and then here's an example of that. But maybe he would have thought it was cool.
But I mean, this is why I wanted the film.
Yeah.
It was my first, when I was visiting Joseph Brock's studio here, we were talking about Nozkowski, and he played this for me. You have it on your Vimeo right account. And really, it made me laugh when he starts talking about all the circles on the rocks, because I was like, oh my God, that is one of the paintings. It really, it was just so, I mean, I've been looking at abstract art my whole life, as we all have, I guess, and I just never understood it like that before. You know, how one could discover kind of motifs and then extrapolate from them and discover in a painting. And it just seems so elemental to me as to the way that even thinking functions, with the way we abstract from reality. He seems to encapsulate that aspect of human consciousness so clearly, and then in his explanation with you, and in a humorous way, or in a way that's whimsical, or a way that shows, and this was my anti-fascist kind of point of view, why conservatives can't make good art, which I kind of find fascinating, is because, you know, it's an irreducible kind of imagining. And that's where Bend Sinister comes up, the book by Nabokov, which is Nabokov spinning a whole tale, and it's about fascism, about a fictional country falling into fascism. And it's right after Nabokov has to go into exile and is living in the US, so it's a second book in English. And he spins the whole tale out of kind of a vision of a puddle. And the puddle's reflecting something, and the puddle's a certain kind of shape. It's almost like, the way he describes it is like mitosis, like a separating, growing cell. And out of this growth system, then the whole story happens. And he refers back to it several kind of obscure ways throughout the book. But I don't think it's a coincidence that the book's about fascism, and this is his counter to that kind of reductive way of thinking. So I feel like abstraction in that way, in a way that Tom's looking at it, has this kind of political undertone to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think he was, I mean, I guess, I think it's pretty anti-fascist to, you know, to be able to kind of, to try to make art by kind of thinking about your own experience and being kind of empathic and thinking about the experiences of other people and how everyone intersects. And I think my dad, I think it's like probably a lot of artists and all artists like that. You are thinking about, you're processing the world, and you know, you're turning it into this, you're trying to translate it into this visual medium. And I think the attraction for my dad of abstract painting is that, you know, there's a kind of boundarylessness of it, like a boundlessness. You can kind of go anywhere with it. And I think his project was, you know, he's taking, I think he's talked about this a lot, he's taking real life experiences and also real life, you know, things he encounters, movies, books, people, ideas, and he's trying to, you know, how does it make him feel? And then again, how can I turn that into a visual thing? And then, but at the same time, have it be about all of these ideas at once, or what is that, you know, here's me making a painting about my mother. I'm just thinking of something he once said, like, he's making a painting about his mother. Well, what does that make me think of? Okay, and what does that make me think of? And what is that? So it's just this endless free association that then I think at a certain point, he's like, well, this shape there's like a Venn diagram where all of those ideas touch in a kind of liminal, formless way, and I'm gonna try to capture that. Even though I couldn't possibly explain it to you, I couldn't possibly like really articulate what that shape is doing, somehow in this internal engine I'm building and working on and tinkering with, you know, through this art project, I'm gonna, you know, try to find these kind of shapes and forms and ideas and just kind of keep trying to execute that, and these painters are gonna have all these connections and ideas for me, but at a certain point he's even gonna lose the thread. I mean, he often would say, like, this painting's about such and such, but some I feel like he'd have a much harder time defining, because it connected to so many different things, even if it had started as a tomato, you know. So.
Well, I have to say, the film, I love it. It's endearing. It's tight. It encapsulates. It seems to me all that I've read now about Nozkowski, it encapsulates so well what other people have talked about. And I love the framing of it, even though it's shaky, but I like the cinema verite stuff myself too.
Yeah.
But you frame so well, so each of the times you kind of zoom in on something he's talking about, one can see the frame of the painting and really feel, yeah, this is a painting already in your shooting. So obviously, you know, you went into filmmaking, your mom's a sculptor. In fact, she has a panel going on right now.
Right at this
started
moment.
at 3
Right
o'clock.
at this moment, that's right.
At
Zurcher.
Zurcher,
Yeah.
one of these Zurcher's place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a show called 15?
It's 13 Women Artists. It's a show that my mom and this other artist,
Joyce Robbins.
Joyce Robbins, and that's my mom, and this other woman, Ann Marshall, they put together this show in 1972 called 13 Women Artists. And
The titles were a lot different back then.
right, it is different
It's
from
more
this
to the
title.
point. Now we're...
And but it's a great show, and so the Zurcher Gallery, they're restaging it right now, and so it's up till February 28th. Highly recommend it. But yeah.
Okay, we're going to open up a little bit here, but there's one last point, and I think the most essential one.
Okay.
One, Casimir has made a feature film called The Outside Story, and in that, the main character is an editor, right? A film editor.
Yes.
And he edits memorials.
Like in memoriam videos.
Yeah, because there is a memorial element to this exhibition, and this is a little bit where I'm talking about, where you have the life, and then you have the relic, or the sort of leftover of a life. I've kind of phrased it as not what is it? You know, art for art's sake, but life for art's sake.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in Nozkowski, it feels a bit like that to me in his approach, and the life lived and what's left behind, and this fascination of yours with memorial films. So explain this, because I think this film is one of those, in other words.
Yeah. I guess, okay, so in this feature film I wrote called The Outside Story, the main character is an editor, but he's he's got a very unique niche, which is that he works on in memoriam videos. And those are, you know, if you don't know, that's like when you watch the Oscars and they have the in memoriam, like 3-minute section where they talk about all the people who have passed away. And as a kid, I just always loved them, to be honest, not because of any macabre reason, but actually because I have very fond memories of watching those moments, watching the Oscars every year, you know, with my parents, and being, you watch this video and it's super, I mean, the music's going, so the feeling's right, but there's these clips, and the clip, you're trying to pick the perfect clip, or the editor presumably is trying to pick the perfect clip to say, this is, you know, a great Jack Lemmon moment. You know, this is a great, you know, whomever moment. And I think, you know, and I remember watching that with my parents and just being like, who was that? That was so cool. That was so great. Who's this person? And then you find out this whole life. You basically, you know, it's like this kernel of inspiration. And so yeah, I've always been really fascinated by them, and I enjoy making them. And it's funny. I mean, I like I'm interested in what you're saying about this as a memorial. I think it, by the virtue of the artist not being there, the subject not being around anymore, it is. But and that's what I was saying when I made it. It's not like I was like, I'm going to watch this after he's dead. It was just, but I do think it's like baked in there somewhere. Is like, you know, when you make a documentary about a subject, you want to. I don't think it's crazy to have a filter like, well, will we still be able to watch this after they're gone? Will it kind of give us something? Will it give us the nature of them? Like, will it give us their, you know, some essential quality of them? And so I did a lot of videos with my dad, and I think they all have, you know, nice pieces. And I've done a couple with my mom. She's like a little bit more challenging subject, but I think, yeah, I think you're just trying to find this essential quality. I think in memoriam videos, you're trying to find this essential quality for these little clips, and here I think, yeah, just trying to kind of boil him down into a 7-minute video, which feels unfair, but you know, if you get some good pieces, then maybe it's still very worth it.
It's enough.
Yeah, it's enough. That's good.
So yeah, we know it's my birthday, but I'm 58 today, and I have my candle burning over here because in this idea of memoriam, I think it's kind of fascinating, is that my mother died when she was 58. So this year I feel like it's going to be a strange one, where one starts to just feel like, well, that's a life. You already got to do it. That's enough. That's all you get. Courbet also died at 58, and he's like one of my most influential artists that I always like to think about. And in relation to this idea of relic, which we're going to get back to as well with Joseph's work and Verna's hair. I just like leading to keep everyone engaged here, but we're gonna get to that in a minute. But so yeah, Lewis, who is at the end of the row over there, so is another artist whose studio I visited and was mentioning and talking about Nozkowski, which is, I guess, how most shows come together in the studio visits. But I want to read how we ended up with this title, which blows my mind, and maybe yours too. And maybe you had to look up a few words like I did. But so Lewis Block was writing about Thomas Nozkowski's show Everything in the World, which was at Pace in 2024. We'll have Lewis tell us all about that in a minute. But I'll just read the first paragraph of that review. In paint, recognition always butts up against necessity, creating the temptation to name something where there is just something. We can stop right there, maybe. So what are you getting at with that sentence? Should I read it again?
If you want to.
It's tough. Yeah, I read it a bunch of times. Okay. In paint, recognition always butts up against necessity, creating the temptation to name something where there is just something. Okay.
Space between some and thing in the second.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's importantly. That show works from the 70s, mostly in 80s. I think I was trying to work through how I'd never really thought of Nozkowski's works as abstraction in terms of coming from something or being abstracted from something concrete in the world. They'd always just been their own thing, abstraction with a capital A. And obviously in the 70s you can see what he's looking at, like a waterfall or a tree or the stars or something. And I think the review is just trying to work through the idea that he is actually abstracting like Picasso or Braque at the beginning, and then it eventually turns into something that's unrecognizable.
You mean at the beginning of the painting?
Or sorry, at
Each painting.
the early phase of his career.
Oh, the early
Yeah.
phase of his career. Abstracting like Braque and Picasso, and that there's still a reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that becomes less and less clear over time, to me at least, but maybe not to others.
Yeah, there's something I think significant when he scales up. What are the sizes again?
These are 22 by 28. He also has 30 by 40s that he would do intermittently in the 22 by 28 phase.
Yeah.
And then, but he's sort of, I think the most paintings he's done are 16 by 20.
And that's the more the 70s size.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are on mostly masonite or canvas board, pre-made panels.
Right. So it seems to me in those early ones too, because of the scale, it's like you've got one move. You can only do like sort of, you can't do a whole lot.
Oh, some of
unless
them
you
are
get real
really
fussy.
Some of them are really built up though, and some are not. But
Whereas the waterfall then becomes maybe more apparent because it's like, oh, that's the one. Whereas in this size, I feel like you can do like 2 or 3 more moves. But maybe that's just me.
he says an interesting thing in the interview with John Yao about always forcing himself to go the opposite way in each layer. Like if he's drawing something organic, he'll then use a grid, or if he's influenced by an urban scene, he'll bring in a natural shape. But then in the video, he kind of gets at how there is geometry in the organic, like the natural arc of the tent caterpillar moth being the shortest distance for surface area or
It's
something.
like engineering.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting in a painting when those borders kind of collapse. Like you can think, oh, I'm using the grid, or oh, I'm going to make a natural shape. But at a certain point, they become the same thing. I've been writing about Lois Dodd, and she has a quote to the effect of like, if my trees didn't know anything about geometry, they wouldn't stand up. Which I like.
All right, I'm gonna finish the paragraph now. Okay. In paint, recognition always butts up against necessity, creating the temptation to name something where there is just something. I remember standing in front of a Thomas Nozkowski painting 6 years ago, staring into its central green mass, which was like moss floating in the canvas's fleshy pink. The coagulated oil was running over the underlying shapes and strings, and those pink ovals felt like Those ovals felt like organs emerging, glistening from this place that was clearly reacting against the air. And then a nice shift here. I remember blowing up balloons as a kid, the halting moment when the humid rubber had been filled to capacity, and how the knot was a navel left on pure form. The most enigmatic of Nozkowski's compositions have that sense of holding in a swelling against their own limits. They are forms developing with the necessary burdens of the material, like cotyledons buckled with loam. That's when my mind went like, what is this guy saying? But anyway, that's so beautiful. That Cotyledons buckled with loam. So I didn't know what a cotyledon was. I still can't say it right. And loam, I don't know.
I mean, very simply, it's just
Yeah.
the little thing that shoots up when you plant a bean or a seed in the ground. It's the little first leaf that shoots up.
Yeah.
And normally there's a little piece of dirt stuck to it, and it has to spring out and fight the dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people.
To me, that's what being stuck in a painting feels like.
Ah, I see. It's like being stuck in a composition of the painting, and then you have to kind of grow out of it, or you know, fight with it, or whatever. In his paintings, you feel like you see that in action,
Right. Yeah.
like a seed sprouting or
Yeah.
growing to its limit, which is always defined by these parameters which he maintains. Do you think that's part of it too? Is that, you know, since the size is kind of a given, it's always horizontal too?
Definitely. And I think we all share that tendency. Joseph and I talk
You
about it
do,
a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jodie stays on the small scale, but her
Yeah.
sizes change. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're still fairly consistent, I feel like, right? Well,
But they're small.
within the same
They're
wheelhouse,
all-
yeah.
They're all small.
The other thing, Joseph and I talk about this one panel in the Met, Giovanni Di Paolo's
Yeah.
Expulsion from Paradise. It's like 18 and a quarter by 20 and a quarter, whatever that makes sense in centimeters. And I know Nozkowski liked Giovanni Di Paolo. Maybe that exact painting, maybe a different one in the Met. There are a few.
Jim's not here. Is it? Jim Hyde, he loves that painting, talks about it all the time too. We can have a whole seminar on that painting.
Yeah, but that's roughly the size of my oils in the other room.
Did you take it from that, or just like the condensed nature?
It feels right. I mean,
Right.
I've reduced and expanded, and that is the one that feels right to me.
Yeah, because, please jump in there.
Same for me. My
Giovanni.
paintings are basically the same size as the Giovanni paintings. Douglas, who's over here, mentioned that to me more so than I even recognize it myself. But I take my sizes directly from Thomas. I saw 16 by 20 as like something that could be a standard that I could kind of push against. I think we kind of have that same kind of tendency to be able to kind of, you mentioned one move, but to me it's like it opens up all moves once I have like a size I can kind of always kind of know the scale of, and how my hand is like related to it, and how my kind of internal thinking and structure is related to it. It allows me to kind of like open it up all the way. And I feel like this maybe kind of something similar to your work. You know, you have this kind of circular oval shape that you can always kind of like work with and against. So the limits allow you to kind of push out. You know.
Can I just say also that I think small paintings are cool because, like, and this is like a direct thing that my dad used to talk about. I think it's probably, like, he's said this in a few interviews, but you know, when he started out, he was doing huge paintings or big paintings, like, and we showed a couple in that show, these 48 by 60s that he worked on, and they're great. And he was working like that, and he got to a place where he said that he thought actually working with a big canvas made him less courageous, because he started thinking about, like, okay, if I make this choice, I'm going to turn this whole quadrant into whatever, into this color. And if I'm wrong, That's going to be such a pain in the ass to go back and fix that like 2 months of work or whatever it is. And he found himself thinking about that, kind of premeditating his choices, and he's like, that is completely ruining the experience here. And so I think he chose small paintings. He often says like he wanted small paintings to kind of go against the idea of like paintings being for bank lobbies and more being for friends' apartments. But I think he's also said that a small painting, and I think this is kind of what you were just saying, is like you can try all the moves. You can try all the moves because you have such a small surface area, relatively small surface area, that messing it up, totally changing it. Like I feel like my dad, and he would constantly do a whole painting and then reject it outright, cover it all up, and be like starting over. But he still thought, he still felt something foundational, but he felt free to do that because it was such a small surface area, and it wasn't governing his choices. So I always thought that was cool.
I kind of think of that as like like the work within the work. The fact that that for you personally, like painting that whole quadrant is going to be a lot of work if you're wrong, and that, your internal systems, it might hold things like maybe like for me it would be like slow me down. I would take less risks. So I often, that's mostly how I think is, for me personally, is the work within the work. How do I motivate myself through the move to like want to get back in it? I think it comes from music for me, or like in the idea of being able to edit something, like to make a song and be able to edit it and then keep editing it, and just like the ease of that. But with painting, you don't have that same ease, so it's like you have further limits. That for me, that worked when I first started painting, to like limit the whole thing, like a 4-minute song. And like, what can I do with 4 minutes? What can I do with 16 and 20 inches?
Totally. Feel the same way? Yeah.
And Louis, so you've both written about Nozkowski, and also, I know you don't paint about Nozkowski per se, but we're here talking about your paintings. And so it's kind of a unique opportunity to talk to someone who writes so well about an artist and who's also going to show that references an artist. Is there a place in your brain where the writing, the words, and the forming of forms in painting come together and diverge? Or how do you rectify that difference? Because you also wrote, in my mind, very poetically about Nozkowski. So it's as if the inability to actually name the thing causes one to have to use language that's as expansive as the paintings are.
I actually think writing makes it prohibitive to make a painting for me. Like I can't, if I'm working on an article, I can't paint at the same time. I can't go to the studio at night and paint. Not that it's not helpful, like it's just a step you have to go through, but they can't happen at the same time.
Oh, that's cool.
I think painting has to exist outside of language, and you can't really think about the words of what you're doing while you're painting.
So it's different parts of your mind than writing, and when you're in writing mode, you're in writing mode.
Yeah.
Right.
It also, I think, has to do with references. Like, you want to be open to references while you're writing, but maybe a little more closed while you're painting.
Right.
Or I do, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not like you're writing poetry per se, or fiction. Definitely not. You write. Although I think you have some possibilities there in your use of language, but Nabokov himself wrote literature like poetry, so you can write criticism like poetry, I guess. Any questions, by the way? Yeah, I kind of want to keep it open. We don't have to wait till the end. We've got several balls in the air.
I have questions for Joseph and Jodie.
Okay.
About references.
Okay.
Do you allow yourselves books of other painters on the table next to you while you're painting, or do you specifically take them away? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I do not have books. I'm not looking at other artists' work when I'm working on my own work. So no, I don't have, and I don't have books. I don't have art books in the studio.
But that might come about almost.
What?
Put it right up there.
Yeah. So no, my answer is no. I don't. But I actually had a question for you. How did the word cotyledon come into your vocabulary in the first place? Like, do you?
David asked me that too. I think the middle school biology class probably.
Oh, really?
I just remembered, sprouting a bean or something on a paper towel.
Because you're a gardener yourself. Did you
I'm
know this
a-
term already?
I am a gardener. I'm a pretty serious gardener, and I had never heard that word before, so it's really interesting to me. It's like,
That's like the one word that did stick with me from biology.
So when you, as far as how did, I like writing too, so did it just come to you as a phrase just like that? Or to describe this experience of Nozkowski, or did you have to fight for that phrase, or how did you get it on paper?
I don't think it was that much of a struggle.
No.
I don't know.
You don't remember?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember the moment?
Blacked out.
I'm just maybe overemphasizing it because it's...
Well, there's that in the Nabokov book. There's that great moment of signing the paper, and he remembers exactly how the ink blot looked like
Yeah.
a puddle.
Right.
So I don't have that memory.
No. John Anderson, you have a question?
Yeah, first of all, David, thanks for a great show.
You're welcome.
Great project. But I wondered, among the painters especially, you're not the disciples of Nozkowski, you're kindred spirits in a way. And I wondered aesthetically if each of you might, for a minute or two, rank the intersection of your aesthetic with the Nozkowski aesthetic as you perceive it.
Right.
You want the whole thing?
Like how much or little you feel you connected to the painting, or that kind of thing. There's other painters I'm sure they're equally engaged with. Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
So the point would be, since we're in the world of Nozkowski here, and since Nozkowski has been influential, it's not about being a disciple of Nozkowski, it's about sharing an aesthetic. And I'm kind of wondering, we heard a little bit about sizes of painting, of, the perimeters and of scale, but, and if that's your answer, that's enough, but I'm wondering if there are other factors for each artist here in terms of relating to Nozkowski and his creative process or the aesthetic as it's, as each perceives it.
Well, I'll talk a little bit. Something similar to I guess what you're asking is something I think about all the time. I think partially because I didn't come to painting traditionally. I came to painting through, to be honest, watching YouTube videos. That was my entire art education. Is self-sought out, self-looked at, kind of self-guided. And so for me, it's like as I kind of looked around and I would find a bit or piece like 16 by 20 here, or this commitment to one thing in somebody else's work, I would just grasp that and kind of hold that dear until it was needed or not needed anymore. And it kind of also formed my thinking of this idea. I think about this all the time of lineage. Just probably one of the major things that I think about in the work. And so to also answer Lewis's question as well, I do keep books around, a lot of books in my studio. I love looking at books while I'm painting because I love thinking about my lineage, whether it be like my actual familial lineage of my family, my dad, my mom, just as far back as you can trace, which for me is not that far back, which is also interesting in the way that I think about that. But also just like artistic lineage. I come from a music background, from classical music, and you can trace, I realized this was like a thing after I left music, where like my teachers would talk about their teachers, and then you would just trace them all the way back to like, for me, I play double bass, to the first man who used like the French bow, like Edar Nani, you know what I mean? And like you could trace both my teachers all the way back to that guy, you know, and I think a lot about what's gained and what's lost through generations, right? And so I think a lot about like what's gained or lost between me and Nozkowski, or between me and my other, I call them fathers and mothers, really, you know. What's gained and what's lost, what's me, what's them, what's part of my DNA, and that kind of ebbs and flows over time. Like sometimes it's like stronger in the image, sometimes it's less strong. But for me, it's like a constant thing that I'm kind of thinking about, or passively thinking about. I can feel it in my subconscious, and sometimes it rises to a conscious level of being like, oh wow, like this is like thinking about like a Nozkowski, or thinking about this artist, or thinking about like Kruger, or thinking about like Gober, or anything like that. Like that in there would like me thinking about Gober a lot, like the hair, you know, and thinking about a whole bunch of other different things. So I am actively thinking about other artists constantly. But I'm always actively like trying like to push against them and maybe make arguments against them. And that comes from just like how I was raised in a lot of ways. This idea of blessings and trying to figure out how to improve, or how to like go further, or something like that. So something I'm actively engaged with.
And I would say that knowing y'all's work, that none of you necessarily do this thing where you see a thing or have an experience and then you're abstract or make a painting from it. I mean, it seems like you're abstract painters, but that kind of economy of meaning that Nozkowski engages with, like his method, I don't know if your method is the same, even if there might be similarities in the results.
I sometimes paint things that I'm looking at.
Okay.
You can never, I mean, they get covered up and
Your
transformed.
knees,
but-
your knees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the yellow one in there, those vertical diagonal shapes are, I was looking out the window at a residency I was doing, and there were some interesting reddish reeds in the river. But
and
they
then you
get covered
added
up.
in the circular shapes kind of late in the game.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, it was on my wall sitting unfinished for a while, and it was actually a template for another drawing that I had that I just put over the painting in a variety of positions. So just playing around with
It worked.
things in the studio, yeah.
Right. Now, many of you saw the show that we did in Ghost Machine prior to the show. So Jodie Manasevit here is important in that regard, because that was a solo show for Jodie, which was these walls with her paintings embedded in the walls. In the places like where Douglas is standing on the opposite side, you can see best where there's an alcove. Thank you. The lavender painting, it's on the opposite side, which is called Marooned. In the show at Ghost Machine was in that little alcove. So when I got the call that there was a show opening or spot opening here at Art Cake, I was sitting in that show and I was like, hey, this could get harvested in my terminology, and sort of rethought and expanded into the Art Cake space, which was much bigger than the other space. And then reading Lewis's review, the Cotyledon really made sense in that regard, because it seemed like Jodie's show was kind of sprouting and growing into, or pollinating, this larger idea for this bigger show. So, and there's cracked elements to this construction over there too. So I really started to think of it like a pod or a seed of a kind of an expanding language that I was trying to understand better by working so closely with Jodie and actually getting her permission to do this plastering technique with her paintings in the walls without her being there, you know, pointing out and saying, no, don't put that color there or that color there. That wasn't really gonna work. So it was an honor to be trusted like that as an artist curator, and to have an artist. And it was very specifically Jodie that would work for that idea in my mind. There was I know a lot of painters, obviously, and I kind of went through my head with no, it wouldn't work for that. No, it wouldn't work with them. No, it wouldn't. It really ended up having to be Jodie's paintings to be embedded in that way. There's this little 1/4 inch that she leaves taped off on the sides of her paintings and leaves a 1/4 inch on the side that realized that nothing but on the opposite side of that 1/4 inch needed really to be there. So one could embed it in the wall with just that 1/4 inch on the edge. And edges, we even have a painting Jodie has titled that's edgewise.
Edgewise.
It's not in the show. But edges, I think, are very important to you, as they are often, it seems like, with abstract painters. I think Lewis's his work in an oval shape has an interesting relation to edge in that regard, because due to this circular shape, your motifs, your forms have to find a different way of sitting in the picture plane, which has been so much of what 20th century was about, or even going back. So one wonders if oval was always the shape of paintings, that paintings would be anywhere near what they are today, But you're discovering that, I think.
Well, the rectangle is a relatively recent shape for painting.
There you go.
When you think about frescoes on church wall or the caves of Lascaux or whatever, we're not talking about rectangles.
So you think you're going to change the game?
I don't feel like I'm changing anything. I mean, painting existed on pottery before it existed on canvas, and that's an oval or a circle. So, in a way, that's more traditional than a rectangle.
Right. Good point. Yeah. Well, the kind of imagery that would be on a pot or whatever is very different than when you end up with, say, Renaissance stretched canvas paintings, for sure, too. So, oil paint, too, whatever. Oh, oil paint, we got to talk about that with Joseph, because everybody paints in oil in here, except this guy who paints with acrylic, so we have to talk about that. I know with you painters, this is very important. But before we get to that, because I'm doing the short and the long, they do this in advertising. Jodie, what about your edges, or us doing this experiment, which is still going on? I mean, I'm very grateful. How do you want to describe a little bit how it came about, or why it is you even agreed to this original idea that was a ghost machine that then led to this? And that conversation we had when you said Nozkowski was the artist you wanted to show with, is there anything in there?
Let me think about this for a second. There's a lot. That's a question that covers a lot of things.
Yeah, about 3 months.
Yeah. The reason that I agreed to sort of just give you permission to do pretty much whatever you wanted with the work was because I've always trusted you as a curator and had great respect for the way that you think about things and put things together. And so I felt, and I liked the original idea of breaking up the traditional gallery space, which in this case was a long, narrow rectangle, by making these kind of wall constructions and breaking up the space that way, which I thought was an interesting idea. So I agreed to basically let you do what you wanted to do because I trusted your intuition and your intellect and the way you put things together. I prefer, honestly, not to have the paintings sunk into the walls.
I was going to ask that.
Yes, I prefer to have them hanging on a wall like a painting hangs on the wall, because the paintings, in my mind, have an object-like quality to them, which becomes irrelevant when they're recessed into the wall. And also, I like the edges of my paintings, even if they're clean, and so I didn't like not being able to see them. So, but at any rate,
Well, they've been liberated here. That was kind of the
they
part
have been
of this too.
liberated here,
Right.
and so There was another point to that question, and now.
About the edge work.
About what?
Edge work. Your interest in edges.
Oh, edges.
Oh,
Well,
my interest in edges.
When did you start doing the 1/4 inch over onto the side?
A long time ago. I mean, I don't actually even remember when I didn't do that. And honestly, I sometimes wonder if I'd like to not do that anymore and just let the edges get messy and, you know, reflect the millions of things that have happened in the painting that you can't see anymore because I had the edges taped so they're clean. But at any rate, I don't actually remember when because it was such a long time ago. At some point I, you know, must have decided, okay, my edges have to be clean so that the painting is contained within a perimeter that's very clearly defined, even if it wraps slightly around. The other thing I think that you were asking about was references. Were we talking about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I've always liked about Nozkowski's paintings, and I love his paintings. He's not necessarily the only painter that I love, or the only painter that I've ever felt influenced by in any way. But I like the way that he has seen something and translated it, and then kind of stayed truer to it than I actually do in my own work. So I often I look at nature all the time, but when I see something that I want to use in a painting that I want to use as impetus to make a painting, I don't necessarily, over the course of the time that it takes me to make the painting, I can lose that reference and kind of allow the painting to take me in another direction. There's often some residual reference, and possibly it's through color. So maybe the dominant color, the predominant color relationships in the painting have an initial reference to the thing that started the whole thing in my mind in terms of that. I'm thinking about a couple of pink paintings that I made recently that were specifically because of some pink flowers that I had seen, but anyway, so yeah.
yeah, this experiment that we did together, for me, working with you was to learn about color, because I felt like your palette and your color sense is next level, and by having to sort of address that with the walls, that was the takeaway that I wanted. I wanted to know how to manage that. And in fact, some of Jodie's house paint is on the walls over here, because your house is even painted with the colors that you're kind of in your paint.
Yeah, actually, and I actually wanted to make sure to tell you that if there's any of that paint
you need it back.
I want it back.
Jodie has famously this box, which I tried to get in this show and we almost did.
Oh, my colored paper.
She has a color chip box with all these colors that are your colors that you've had for 40 years that just sits in the corner of the studio. And yeah, they're like teals, like the scarf we have on her. You know, they have color references, yeah.
Yeah, my colored paper box is actually, I used to be a paste-up artist, which a lot of you probably, if you're of a certain age, you don't even know what that is because it doesn't exist anymore. But it used to be that when magazines or newspapers were produced, you actually cut and pasted columns of copy onto mechanicals, they were called, and then they were photographed, and And if there was something that was in color, the color was coded according to I forget now what it was called, but according to this color plan thing, it would say to the printer, this needs to be in, Pantone 124 or something like that. And then the printer would know how to use the color. So anyway, so my color paper collection is from when I was a paste-up artist, and I had these millions of pieces of color because I had to reference them for printers. And so those are my color, that's my colored paper box. And now I just like it because I like to look at the colors, and sometimes I put pieces together just to see a certain relationship.
Oh, do you like hold it up to the painting?
I mean, sometimes, because there is no color that I don't like. I like all colors. It's the color relationships that I'm interested in. So sometimes it helps to be able to use the paper. I mean, I don't use it all that much. It's
Right.
kind of
I just discovered it in the corner studio one day.
Yeah.
Just curious about it.
How do you decide color, Louis?
I do have whatever it's called, coloring chips, but I don't use them. I just hold the palette knife with the color up, like right against the painting, realize it's wrong, mix it again, keep doing that. But at a certain point, you just have to put it on the painting, and then you'll realize it's still wrong, and wash it away somehow. Going back to John's question, though, the thing that I admire the most about Nozkowski paintings that I hope to achieve in mine is there's always a sense that it could have not worked out. Like it's not, I don't know, there's no pattern that he's following that will work out to make a good painting. It's always discovered canvas by canvas, if that makes sense. So if I ever feel like I'm making a painting and I'm not done with it and I know it's gonna be good, that's a problem.
Wait, say that again?
Like if I'm halfway through a painting and I can already see the end of it and know that it's gonna be good, like I've done something wrong and it's not gonna work out.
I like efficiency. I like efficiency.
So what do you do then?
And then you have to mess it up.
So how do you mess it up? I mean, do you wipe it down, or do you?
I mean, you
just-
have to, like, there's always something you want to keep layer by layer because it's the best part of the painting. And at a certain point, it just becomes precious that you're painting around this shape that you think is good. And maybe you don't finish that painting ever, or you like you let yourself destroy that part, and it becomes a better painting. But
I have a quick question, just because you're making me think of something that my dad would work on like lots of paintings at once, and it was really an effort, I think, to never get stuck on something or be too perfectionist about it, but always to be like, okay, get to this point with the painting, not sure where to go, put it aside, pick up the next one, see if that thinking influenced this one. Like it was just like they all were kind of working together, and they all could take years, but he'd also always be working on could be 20 paintings. I mean, it could be just his whole library of paintings of unfinished ones. He would just be like, well, let me go, back through this one. I never quite sorted that one out, and the way I would work on this one informed that. So I was just curious, do you guys, do you all work on just one at a time, or do you work on multiple at once? And how does that inform how they work? Does that make sense?
I work on more than one at a time, and they're often in different states of. I sand my paint. In response to what Louis just said, if there's one thing in a painting that I really love, and the rest of the painting isn't working, and I'm trying to make it work because I love that one thing, it almost always ends up that that's the one thing you have to get rid of. And so what was I going to say?
What does that tell you about life?
So anyway, so yes, I work on more than one painting at the same time, And I often wipe them down and scrape the paint off, and sometimes actually sand all of the paint off, which takes forever. Sometimes at the end of a day in my studio, I realize I just spent 5 hours in my studio and all I did was, sand 5 paintings down to the gesso. And I also do what you just said. When I'm looking for a color relationship, I often also take my palette knife with some paint on it and hold it up next to the painting to see whether or not that color is the right color.
So tell us about this acrylic paint that you use.
Yeah, the way you guys paint is so different from how I paint. I find it kind of interesting in a lot of ways. I use acrylic paint for a lot of reasons. I think acrylic paint is like, obviously there's the mechanics of it. It dries fast. I like speed. I like efficiency. That's just kind of how I was built. And that's just kind of how I came to painting. So I never developed a love for oil painting. Never developed a love for oil paint.
Have you ever used it?
I've used it, don't like it. And some of the paintings do have oil paint in them. Like that has oil paint in it. The white painting on the wall over there, just so I could wipe it down if I didn't like where I put the dots. So I only use material for like, out of like necessity of like what I need it for, to kind of work against kind of like how I kind of work. If I'm a little bit unsure, I'll use oil paint so I can wipe it down. You can see some smudge marks on there. But I like acrylic for the speed, but more than that, I like acrylic for, I think it allows me to do things that I can't do with oil paint. I like transparency. I know you wanted to talk about this. I like transparency, I like translucency, I like opaqueness. And those are just my natural tendency. I'm not really a colorist. Colors kind of, for me personally, like I'm painting at Verna's studio right now. I have maybe about 7 colors, and I'm only using 2 or 3 of them across 4 or 5 paintings. And so it's kind of like, it's not really my thing. And so that's why I kind of like the show, because I love seeing painters who use colors, because it's just not my natural tendency. So like, that's why I love Nozkowski, because I'm like, I can't really use color in that same way. Or like the blue paint in the back, like that form of his with like all those colors just like in those lines, creating this kind of beautiful thing. And it's just so different than how I think. It's just this really kind of marvelous thing. But it's funny. The way you guys are talking about sanding the part that you like down, that does happen sometimes for me. But I try months before I do that. Because I like being able to keep the history of like the material that I use, which is the gel. And like once you sand that, it's just gone. You can't get that quality back of that translucency. And I try forever to keep that. And so but I only really work on maybe 2 or 3 paintings at a time. I think that's also because who can afford to work on 30 paintings at a time? I can't. But also I like the focus of trying just to like again and again, just look at it and just give my full attention to just like stepping in the studio, looking at it, maybe sanding it down, maybe re-gelling, maybe sanding in one section down and just trying to like figure it out. And just like, beating the head up against the wall and just like, I'll put a painting in above my bed, I'll just like look at it for just, as I'm on my phone on TikTok, and look, TikTok and look. And it's like a loop that I'm just like trying to like find something, trying to trigger something in my own brain just to like figure that out, like to figure out what I'm missing. And that's kind of like a structure that I kind of work in. And it kind of forces me to
From TikTok to your painting.
From TikTok to listen to young fellas. It just dance. It could be a whole host of things. It's just trying to find something that maybe I don't have at the moment.
Yeah.
To like as a move that can maybe unlock something I never really thought of. And if I have to, we'll sand it down.
Yeah, you're interested too in architecture and the Memphis Milano school of architecture, which is fascinating because Joseph put together a book at Foreign and Domestic that's pretty much Quattrocento painting and the Memphis School.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Quattrocento painting for sure, but it's also just design. It's a design school that was around from like 1980 to 1987. Even this name of Memphis comes, obviously from Memphis. The reason they named it the Memphis School is that it's all Italians. They named it Memphis because of there's different stories. Like Elvis is from Memphis, and I think they were listening to Bob Dylan's song about Memphis at the time, and they liked how kind of amorphous it is, because it's also a place in Egypt, and that kind of itself interests me, like this idea of two things being related. Again, this thing of lineage and name. But also that book also just includes 2,000 architectural spaces, not by Loam, but Y2K and just a whole breadth of different things. And it just goes into my thinking about being being inside a culture and being affected by it. It's like another layer of lineage that you sometimes are aware of, sometimes you're not aware of. I grew up in the 90s, 2000s, that's kind of the design that was around. Last night, me and Verna were watching Spy Kids, and just thinking about the design of these interiors are gorgeous. I never knew this as a kid watching this. I just thought kids doing dope shit is fire. But now it's okay, this did affect me. I am thinking about the exact same spaces that are in this movie that I saw when I was 13, 14.
Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I don't know about that.
That was my You want to talk about relics and Verna's hair, which is embedded in the gel on one of the paintings in the back, which is kind of a new direction? Because this is maybe to close up and then maybe ask some questions, but to bring it back around to relic and lineage and memory and say life for art's sake, which is my new motto. Where you're kind of left with these objects. And we have then the holy pupucce, which are the prepus. In Italian, I bet it's pupucce. But prepus, the holy prepus. Does everybody know what the holy prepus is? Joseph is going to tell us. And then we'll close with Verna's hair, which is in case. And Goldens, if anybody here know about, the Goldens residency. Yes.
Right, we did it.
Anyway, Joseph needs to go there and get a lot of
free stuff. Free stuff.
And the bounty paper towel test.
Oh, the bounty paper towel. I mean, for me, I feel I've always only thought about painting mostly as just something, when I look at painting, I never had, it's weird, I never had an outright love for painting. I just decided I like the life of a painter. I like the life of an artist, to be honest. And so everything after that decision was just looking and trying to figure out how to eat everything, how to ingest it into my body, which actually is one of the ways that they actually were named Prepus Crunchers, I think is the name, or Holy Foreskin Crunchers. They would taste, there are these people that would go around, basically Prepus is foreskin, and there was a relic of Jesus's foreskin in, I think, the city Calcutta, I don't know how to say it, and this I mean, number one, there were 17 at one point, different places that I think they had Jesus' foreskin, which was supposed to be the last, piece of his body left on earth, because Jewish men would get circumcised, 8 days after they were born, so at the beginning of the year for us. And so there would be these people that would go around and taste these foreskins to see if they were truly, Jesus's foreskin. And one of the tests is if it was sweet. If it tasted sweet, it would add to the authenticity that it was, that it was real. Which is funny because I'm thinking about that, and that's kind of how I paint. It's maybe not eating foreskin, but I'm eating just how a painter is placing paint. I'm just kind of consuming constantly,
Until it tastes sweet.
if it tastes sweet, then I'll use it. If I don't, we'll poop it out. But
Does that relate to the library of scents?
yeah, same thing. Yeah. The scents. Yeah, I have a library of scents, of fragrances. It's a whole nother thing. But actually, peculiarly enough, when I was researching the Holy Pre-Bruce, one of the miracles that led to the authenticity from the Pope was that when they discovered it, there was a sweet aroma around the foreskin, and also around the whole town. There was a sweet, fragrant aroma around the whole town, and that was like one of the miracles that led to them, saying this is the actual foreskin. It went missing, I think, in the 1950s or 60s, and has not been seen since then. I'm sure somebody ate it, with COVID for a certain amount of power.
Show up in another painting.
But one thing I've been thinking about a lot is, because I use geometry in my paintings a lot, was trying how to push against geometry a little bit, and also how to bring something more tangible in the paintings. I used to put rocks in my paintings, and so for me, the encapsulating of Verna's hair in the painting, everybody has been thinking of it as kind of like this lover's thing, which it is, I guess that, but it was also just a way of like referring to me like this push and pull, this access and not access, this visual access, but then this kind of encapsulation of not being able to necessarily get to it, which was one of the big things I noticed when we were in Italy. Like all these bodies are in these like glass and tombs that you can see, and what it is, but you can't quite touch it. But there's this weird access to it, and I think the painting, the hair. There you go.
I just wanted to ask.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you
Please.
about your relationship with the edges also, because I was looking at the painting there, right? And I was looking so much around the edges that they seem very, very important. The fact that you expose the history through the edges is something that you think about, or is just, whatever?
Both. I think it's a very performative thing to lay down the surface. So I'm thinking about it, but I'm more so interested, like when I'm laying down the gel, I'm more so interested in the consistency and the surface that I'm going to be painting on. And I'm kind of looking at the edges, and then I kind of go back in and have been thinking more, especially more recently, about what the edges mean particularly. Like in the brown painting, if you look at the top where the white kind of like almost jets off of the painting, like that had that edge there, but I kind of carved it out. Same thing with the what did I name the painting? Pergola Court. I kind of carved the edges off. So I am actually thinking about the edges, but part of it is like just letting it be what it is.
Right.
Just letting the frame kind of be what it is, and letting it kind of, letting it be free, but then kind of control. So just kind of back and forth. But for me, it's like the paintings are so like graphic that like the edge is a way to kind of also push against that, and kind of lead back to like what you were saying earlier, Jodie, about just letting it be an object is kind of part of that as well. But also I like the idea of like how far the edge can go off the canvas and you can paint on it. You know what I mean?
It's very evident there.
Yeah, like,
it's really going over.
Yeah, because like
it's fragile also, so it looks fragile. So it gives the painting this feeling of an object that has a fragility also on the edges.
I have a new painting in the studio right now that's put up, and it hopefully it hasn't broken, because it goes so far off the edge. I had to put structures in, but I had to like glue structures behind it. He's seen it, to try to like make sure that like it doesn't just like everyone get hit or it get like chipped. It like goes like 2 or 3 inches off, but it's just the same material.
Right.
It just pushed so far. I just kept doing it till like it's not even the painting. It's something else. There's nothing behind it. It's just the surface, just extended. And I like the idea of like boundaries and erasing boundaries, or just kind of thinking about that in those kind of ways.
So anybody have more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Thank you. It's a really beautiful show, and congratulations. I had a question for the filmmaker, actually. The film reminds me of a Wallace Stevens poem, and it's interesting that he takes us to a landscape that is like a junkyard rather than a heroic or, like a kind of beautiful. And even what he points out, he seems like an environmentalist to me. He knows about moss, which I know a lot about, and invasive species. And I was wondering, there is I think maybe some abstract painters, and I'm sensing maybe you're in that camp, wouldn't like that sort of anti-elitist, not the elitist, open invitation to understanding abstract painting. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if that was like specifically important to him. Do you know what I'm saying?
Like, you're saying that a lot of abstract painters like a more kind of like closed system?
No, I don't even know what abstract painters are like. I just remember bringing people to see his work mm-hmm. and wanting words to explain it. And me as an artist, I was like, what? Like, can't you just like look at it and experience it? And I do think people that are not artists would have a harder time mm-hmm. reading the work. And I think he really puts his hand forward. Mm-hmm. And I see a parallel in that and the kind of landscape you take us to. I guess that's what I'm...
Yeah, I think, I guess what I can say about that is, I think that's an accurate reading of him. I mean, I think that's why he's so worried about leading the viewer. He wants you to also bring your own interpretation, and he is not kidding when he says that interpretation is as crucial as anything he's trying to do. And so I think that's, him really trying to tell the audience or tell the viewer to really kind of like trust yourself and have an experience with the painting. Not kind of like mess with that. So I guess that to me seems kind of anti-elitist. In other words, that like there's no one way to read the painting, there's no perfect way to read the painting. It's really like bring your own experience to it. And if he happens to be in the gallery with you, he'd be delighted to talk to you about it. But I think he really wants you to have your own experience. So I think that's somewhat of a non-elitist approach. In terms of the environmentalism, he definitely was. He's someone who's really interested in land preservation. The junkyard it's funny, we actually walked by it like hundreds of times because it's actually a midpoint. We're on the way to this place called, I think it's Rock Pond, is like the name of the hike, and or the destination. But there's a few up there like that. And I always was interested in this too, but because like the land's always changing and roads up there, this is in upstate New York, this is in Ulster County. But there were like working farms like up on these mountains, and there'd be these roads and people traveling them, and that would be their regular junkyard. And now you look at it and you're like, this is, it's just pure nature. It's always been like that. In fact, it was really, it was actually like a place that was used for a long time. So I guess I've always been fascinated by that scene. There's actually a bunch of these kind of grown over junkyards where nature's kind of taken it over. I know that he really liked that aspect of it too, that nature sort of was winning, was taking over the kind of man-made elements. So yeah, I think that, I guess in terms of the talking about the junkyard, it was really more serendipitous than anything that we happened to there. That's a real, he's getting into it, but it's like so unplanned. If you listen to the rest of that hour of filming, I asked bad questions, we're off on tangents, but we just happened to sync up at that moment. And, just was doing all these things that he was interested in.
Oh, we have another question. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to comment, a little bit. One is beautifully brought together, all of the work. It just seems a great experience. Thank you. And I love the film in the opening of this idea of curiosity being this sort of access point, and you're capturing of that shaking aside, which doesn't work. No, but you really were able to focus in on what he was pointing to, which I think is not a small skill when it comes to filming things, so kudos. And it gave us access to what he was pointing to, and I love this idea that it's like, well, if you look, you will discover. And that was a really beautiful opening for understanding all of what you guys are talking about. And so I thought it was a nice way of connecting it. And you also, said something really beautiful about the restriction of being a familiar shape, and the restriction of a familiar shape giving you, your body, the knowledge of the limitations and therefore freedom. And so that was also related to the film. So anyway, I just wanted to, your work is beautiful. So anyway, the painting on these walls, you did that?
Yeah, the plaster.
The plaster?
Yeah.
It's also really fun.
Yeah.
Part of the show.
It's a big abstract painting.
Yeah. Well, nice.
Yeah, I didn't mention the abstract painting for me. I don't consider myself an abstract artist or even a painter per se, but I do think about body motions where your body's brought into the subject of the painting or the surface. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yes, please.
I think everyone's probably tired, so I should probably not be doing what I'm going to do. But I thought it was so great, like everything's great, and you did such a nice job, David. It's a hard thing to bring everybody have a voice. But there are so many issues that were sort of brought up that I guess I just want to sort of spit out my opinion in relationship to maybe extending your responses as opposed to a question per se. But one of the things I just can't help but think about the talk about scale and size in relationship to the corporeal, in relationship to Christian painting and the Giovanni de Paolo. I mean, I'm not really sure if he did any major altarpieces, but he's coming out of a miniaturist discipline, probably learning how to write make illuminated manuscript. So that picture is actually kind of big, and in that picture, it's actually a picture of the whole universe, right? It's like kind of trying to figure out like what the universal position of heaven in relationship to earth actually would look like, which is not just the expulsion from the garden, but like questions of like, where is the garden, where is heaven in earth? So it's like a totally cosmos picture. So the size is one thing, but the scale of the picture is like the universe, and I think that I can't help but think, but Nozkowski's size, as someone who works within that realm myself, it's like big enough to not be a miniature, and small enough not to be life size. So its scale possibility is kind of endless, because it's not really in the world of the
I always feel like it's the hardest size. You don't get any advantage from scale shift.
Yeah. And then in relation to that, I think, from my own reading, historically, like if you put Nozkowski up against Richter, they're coming at a lot of things at the same time. The sort of encyclopedic, post-failure painting, post-failure painting and the encyclopedic. Richter sort of does like an atlas of everything, and he's going to make the big picture. He's going to paint every subject, every genre. And for Nozkowski, it's all synthesized, within the realm of happening at the same time, all at once. But the encyclopedia of references to style, references to the history of painted form, all these things are in each and all the pictures without the sort of categorical distinctions that Richter makes. And they're happening at the same time. Right. And for that, he's like, very heroic in a obviously people are, I don't think you have to make excuses for, I think that he's got great confidence and
does not back away from seriousness. Your father, you know, and anyway, without the humility, you don't need the humility, really. Like, anyway.